Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe Jaya Giri Raja Jaya Giri Raja Jaya Giri Raja Jaya Giri Raja Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe Jaya Nitai Chaitanya Chandra Nitai Gaura Chandra Gaura Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol. Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stotara Sata Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Stotara Sata Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki. Iskcon founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ananti Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem Sikha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhana Ki. Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki. Sri Mayapur Dham Ki. Ganga Maya Ki. Yamuna Maya Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Tulsi Devi Ki. Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki. Samabeda Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Garanga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunjabi Hari Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavadaba Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Janavadaba Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Janavadaba Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavadaba Jaya Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunjabi Hari 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 Jaya Gopi Janavadava Jaya Girivaradari 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 Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Nitai Gona Haribo Nitai Gona Haribo Nitai Gona Haribo Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Take that, thanks. Nice. Hare Krishna. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 2. And the verse number we're going to read today, I think, is text 5. Is it? No, it's not 5. It's the first one. It's the first one. 5 was yesterday. Text 1. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet ashtapraya shubhadrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Jai. So this chapter is about the activities of Maharaj Agnidra, as it's stated in the title. He is a king, the son of Priyavrata. Priyavrata finishes kingly business and wants to go back to the forest and return to his austere life, to his spiritual activities for liberation. And he leaves the business of being the king to his son, Agnidra. He's a very good king, pious, religious, and he wants a wife. Lord Brahma sends a heavenly damsel to him. He attracts her with his sweet words, and they enjoy royal pleasures together, Prabhupada says in the summary, for many years. Eventually she returns to her own abode, actually, in the heavenly planets. And he cannot forget about her. So he continues his life meditating on her in this way. And eventually will join her in the heavenly planets after finishing his kingly duties. Every now and then in the Bhagavatam you'll have descriptions of the sexual attraction between a man and a woman, and it becomes the detail and description. The detail gets a little more intense as you get through the Bhagavatam. So there's a description in the 4th canto, Paranjana, 5th canto. This description's a little more detailed, talking about the psychology of male and female psychology on this level. So Bhagavatam kind of throws these little tests in there. How advanced are you? Are you detached from this yet? It's kind of interesting. And then, because ultimately you have Krishna and his pastimes with the gopis, there's not a single tinge of sexual attraction or attachment there. But they're dancing and they're interacting as if it's like that, but it's not ordinary things. So ultimately there's this rasa lila, and if one's not sufficiently realized in spiritual life, they'll be distracted by these external things. So Bhagavatam, it seems like the Bhagavatam is throwing a test at you every now and then. Can you get through this without being agitated? If you can't, go back a canto. It's my own personal realization of the things. Oh yeah, this is a little more difficult to read than something else. So at any rate, the verse we're going to read is not particularly about that. I think I'll just read the Sanskrit. I'm not sure quite how to deal with the Sanskrit at this point because it's in prose, so there's no real meter to any of the Sanskrit verses. I remember being in Dallas years ago, and Keshava Bharati Maharaj was giving class, and he was giving class based off of the on this section of the Bhagavatam, 5th canto, and it's in prose for a long time, so there's no meter, there's no rhyme. He's like, I'm just going to read it because, and he went right through it. It was really cool. He was like, I think I did it right. He just, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, so that said, I don't know, I'll do my best. I'll just read the Sanskrit, and then we could go through the word for word, I guess, on this one, and then we'll do translation and purport. The purport's really neat because it's distinctly divided into 2 sections, comparing and contrasting. The topic of the class today, according to our schedule, is genuine protector versus tax collector. Kalakanta Prabhu's ingenious titles for lectures. They're very good. So those who are giving classes, please take note of those titles and try to see the truth and beauty of what's in the purport and the verses. It's very helpful. Nice guideline for giving class. So anyway. So this verse, Shri Shuka Uvacha Ivam Pari Pitari Sampravite Tad Anusha Sane Vartamana Agnidro Jambu Dvipau Kasha Praja Aura Savad Dharma Vekshamanaha Prayagopayat. There it is. So let's do the word for word. Let's read it all together. Sri Shukadev Goswami Uvacha said, Evam, thus, Pittare, when his father, Samprivritte, took the path of liberation, Tat Anusansane, according to his order, Vartamanaha, situated, Agnidra, King Agnidra, Jambudvipa Okshasa, the inhabitants of Jambudvip, Prajaha, citizens, Aurasavat, as if they were his sons, Dharma, religious principles, Avekshamanaha, strictly observing, Prayagopayat, completely protected. Gopayat. You have this word Gopa in this, Prayagopayat, completely protected. I just think that's interesting. Can we have a volunteer to, let's see. Yeah, let's all read the translation together. Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, after his father Maharaj Priyavrata departed to follow the path of spiritual life by undergoing austerities, King Agnidra completely obeyed his order. Strictly observing the principles of religion, he gave full protection to the inhabitants of Jambudvipa, as if they were his own begotten sons. Somebody want to read the first paragraph of the purport?
Following the instruction of his father, Maharaj Priyavrata, Maharaj Agnidra ruled the inhabitants of Jambudvip according to religious principles. These principles are exactly contrary to the modern principles of faithlessness. As clearly stated here, the king protected the citizens the way a father protects his begotten children. How he ruled the citizens is also described here. Dharmavekshamana, strictly according to religious principles. It is the duty of the executive head of a state to see that the citizens strictly follow religious principles. The Vedic religious principles begin with Varnashram Dharma, the duties of the 4 Varnas and 4 ashrams. Dharma refers to principles given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The first principle of Dharma, or religion, is to observe the duties of the 4 orders as enjoined by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to people's qualities and activities, society should be divided into Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, and then again into Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Vanaprasthas, and Sannyasis. These are religious principles, and it is the duty of the head of state to see that his citizens strictly follow them. He should not merely act officially. He should be like a father who is always a well-wisher of his sons. Such a father strictly observes whether his sons are performing their duties, and sometimes he also punishes them.
All right. Who wants to read the other side of the coin here?
Just contrary to the principles mentioned here, the presidents and chief executives in the age of Kali are simply tax collectors who do not care whether religious principles are observed. Indeed, the chief executives of the present day introduce all kinds of sinful activity, especially illicit sex, intoxication, animal killing, and gambling. These sinful activities are now very prominently manifested in India. Although 100 years ago these 4 principles of sinful life were strictly prohibited in the families of India, they have now been introduced into every Indian family. Therefore, they cannot follow religious principles. In contrast to the principles of the kings of old, the modern state is concerned only with propaganda, for levying taxes, and is no longer responsible for the spiritual welfare of the citizens. The state is now callous to religious principles. Srimad Bhagavatam predicts that in Kali Yuga, the government will be entrusted with Dasyu Dharma, which means the occupational duty of rogues and thieves. Modern heads of state are rogues and thieves who plunder the citizens instead of giving them protection. Rogues and thieves plunder without regard for law, but in this age of Kali, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, the lawmakers themselves plunder the citizens. The next prediction to be fulfilled, which is already coming to pass, is that because of the sinful activities of the citizens and the government, rain will become increasingly scarce. Gradually, there will be complete drought and no production of food grains. People will be reduced to eating flesh and seeds, and many good, spiritually inclined people will have to forsake their homes because they will be too harassed by drought, taxation, and famine. The Krishna consciousness movement is the only hope to save the world from such devastation. It is the most scientific and authorized movement for the actual welfare of the whole human society.
Namagyanatamrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshulamintam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhuktale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam So the business of the kshatriya is to give protection. It's supposed to give protection to the citizens, right? That's the responsible business of the kshatriya. So how do the citizens need protection? They need protection for their body, they need protection for their mind, and they need protection for the soul. And therefore the kshatriya's business is to keep the enemies at bay. So the rogues and ruffians don't harm people. To protect from harm is kshatriya. He provides with the taxes that he collects. He's supposed to provide knowledge to the people by supporting the brahmanas, by giving the brahmanas are to be subsidized in their activities by the government, so that there's free health care. All the Ayurvedic doctors should be fully supported by the government and the brahmanas, so that education is available to everyone, regardless of their condition. Because the human form of life needs to be elevated gradually. It's the purpose of human life, is to elevate the consciousness ultimately to Krishna consciousness. So the kshatriya, or the king's position, is a very responsible position. And here it's put in simple terms that the king's primary duty is to make sure that Everyone is following their religious duties. And of that is establishing varnashram, the varnas and the ashrams, and make sure that everyone is engaged according to that. In a lecture, Prabhupada said that a king should test the brahmanas, see if they're actually doing their brahminical business properly. And if they're not, he has a right to punish them. And the brahmanas, in the same way, have this responsibility over the kings, though they don't always exhibit it. But in the case of Maharaj Vena, in the 4th canto we studied, King Vena was a demon, and the brahmanas could not tolerate his atheism, and so he was killed by them. So the whole business of human society, of a responsible human life, is to give protection. Everyone has some job on some level to give protection. Why? Because this material nature, this body, is destined for death. It's destined for old age. It's destined for disease. And to remain in that condition lifetime after lifetime is not good. Actually, therefore, the only true protection that one can get is knowledge about God and how to serve and love God. That's the only real protection in the end. To get liberated from the material world and take shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna is the goal of life, because not only does it make us unlimitedly happy, it protects us from the harm that is being caused to us by association with material nature lifetime after lifetime. And the human being that is the most responsible human being does this for themselves, but also guides others in that way. And indeed, I can't think of the verse right now, but the translation of this verse is that one should not become a father, a king, a kshatriya, a spiritual master, a friend, if you cannot liberate your dependent from the material world. So everyone has, in Varnashram, everyone has a different job of protection. Ultimately, responsible human life, again, means how to give shelter. So the Kshatriyas, they give shelter to all the praja, all the citizens, including the animals, including the trees, including all the living entities. And they basically arrange and manage the relationship of the living entities between each other and their religious activities. Brahmanas, they give knowledge, so that ultimately they protect everyone from themselves or from material nature through knowledge. The king also does this, but is not as expert as a Brahmana because of they have other business besides just helping individuals cultivate knowledge and cultivating knowledge himself. He has to do the practical work. So it creates some bias, and so it limits the capability sometimes. As in with Dhruva Maharaj, he became bewildered by his passion and anger when he fought with the Yakshas because of the killing of his brother in the 4th canto, if you guys remember that. We studied that last semester. Who do the Vaishnavas give shelter to? What's their business? Cows, the animals, animal husbandry, and finances to make sure everyone doesn't starve. Everyone in society is well supplied with bodily necessities. That's their business. Yeah, and they protect the animals. Ultimately, every man in a family has got to protect his family. Every lady in the family has to protect her family, and particularly her child. So human life means to give shelter, ultimately. And the person that is most responsible is able to give the most shelter. And this is the Vaishnava, ultimately. The Vaishnava. So what do you think? How is someone in one of these different positions? What is the primary characteristic? What do you think? What does Bhagavad Gita say? Anybody?
Particularly, are you asking?
What is the characteristic what is the qualification Like there's one primary characteristic, quality, not specifically, but a general quality, like the quality of what would put you into a different category in Varnashram. What's that? Guna and karma. Yeah, your nature and your karma. Yeah. And that's rude, but that's based off of what? Something you've done in your previous life. So yeah, I mean guna karma, yeah. By that you can tell what varna someone's a part of. What I'm thinking of is intelligence, right? Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that, there's the Kshatriya, he makes a distinction between Kshatriyas and Brahmanas and their level of intelligence and then everybody else, basically, and that they have less intelligence. But intelligence is not just ability to manipulate material nature and know it, per se. Intelligence is useless if there's no ability to back it up with action. And what is intelligence if it doesn't produce any happiness, right? So if you know something, for example, this is modern intelligence, right? The atheistic intelligence. We build a big bomb and we're so smart we can build big bombs and kill everybody with it and cause all this suffering. That is technically, according to the Vaishnava standard, Vedic standard, not intelligence, right? This is insanity. It's madness. Because it doesn't produce any happiness. It doesn't produce any. So if you are all intelligent but you can't control your senses, now we're getting to it. If you can't control your senses, right, you may know so many things, but without controlling your senses, you can't stop yourself from suffering because your mind will drive you to do all sorts of things. So real intelligence means, can you control your senses? And who are the best at controlling their senses? Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas are, because we have shelter of Krishna. And therefore they can give shelter unlimitedly. One can become the master of the whole world. In the Nectar of Instruction, Vachu Vegam, Manasakroda Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udar Pasta Vegam, Etan Yo Vegam, Vishahita Dhiram, Sarvam Apimam Pritivim Shashisha. They can instruct the whole world because their mind is fully controlled. Brahmanas are superior to Kshatriyas because they have greater control of their mind and senses, so on and so forth. So when one takes, or one has facility, when Krishna gives someone facility for material nature, he gives that facility because he sees this person has developed a certain amount of self-control, and therefore by self-control you do good for others. Selflessness. By self-control you can be selfless. Without self-control you will be selfish, invariably, because material nature drives you in that way. So human life is a life of responsibility. Responsibility to do what? Control our senses. Control our mind, body, and senses so we don't suffer ourselves and don't cause suffering for others. The more expert you are at that, the more you are capable of not becoming contaminated or corrupted by material nature as you gain more influence over it. Therefore, the best policy is to find a pure devotee and surrender. Surrender to the pure devotee. Because they will use whatever mind, body, senses, intelligence you have in Krishna's service for your benefit, not for their benefit. They have no benefit other to achieve because they've achieved the highest thing. They're fully self-satisfied. So ideally, our kings, the managers of society, the kings are like that. So when they take money, when they take taxes, they then redistribute that taxes for the benefit of everyone in society. But because this is the Prabhupada's point, the modern Kshatriyas, the modern leaders are ignorant about what is the goal of life and how to achieve it, they can do nothing but simply collect taxes and make a pretension of benefit for others, where actually all the benefits that they give are simply driving people more and more into ignorance and misery. because of the atheistic nature of things, because they don't understand the Vedas. They don't understand the goal of life, and so they can't really give benefit. If you have a huge long equation, you may get everything right in the equation, but if somewhere in there you get one thing wrong, the whole thing is wrong. Whole thing is wrong, right? The whole thing is wrong. So they might be proud of everything that they do, all of their business that they conduct, and in some small way they give benefit to one section of society, and then they pat themselves on the back and say, see how we're giving benefit to this one section of society. We benefit this one demographic of people, and I benefit them greatly. You can be proud of that. But if you point out how you're taking from another place to benefit these people, and then they're suffering because of that, they'll become angry and, like that. So one can't avoid hypocrisy as long as you leave Krishna out of the equation, because the soul is never served, the soul is never protected, and the individual is never protected. And ultimately society is never truly protected by that process. Yeah. Let's see, are there any questions or comments? Maybe we can have a discussion at this point.
Thank you, Prabhu. I was appreciating the point about if you can't control your senses, then you're naturally going to be like drawn into selfishness. And I was thinking about like the politicians and whoever's in charge nowadays, their senses are completely uncontrolled. So it's got to be just kind of like a show that they're caring about others.
Yeah. Yeah. In the 5th canto, Maharaj Rishabdev, he says that people who are not devotees, they can't have any good qualities. But someone who is a devotee has all the good qualities. Because material nature is if your faith is in material nature, Shri Radha Nilamadava Ki Jai. If your knowledge and your faith and your activities never extend beyond the gratification of the mind and the senses, the different circumstances, the conditions that may pop up can turn you into the worst person in the world, because all your happiness can be taken away at any moment by the arrangement of material nature. So your good qualities cannot be trusted. You cannot be trusted, because you're completely dependent on your karma, other people's karma who you interact with. Now, of course, it's never really fully like that, in the sense that people are a mixture of having faith in transcendental qualities, even though they might not know it. Someone might have faith in peacefulness, for example, right? So if they're feeling themselves not to become peaceful, instead of becoming a terrible person, they just kind of walk away. So you'll find all these different mixtures in that. But ultimately, if one is not taking shelter of Krishna, you can always, material nature can always push you into an extreme point, Therefore, if we truly want to have all good qualities, if you want to have all good qualities consistently, all the time, you have to take shelter of the Supreme Lord. And to that degree that we're not, to that degree we're susceptible to the influence of lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy, so on and so forth. Now, if you take society together as a whole, and people are making a sincere attempt to make spiritual advancement by contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we may not, and certainly we're not, perfect at having taken shelter at Krishna's lotus feet, but at the same time, to whatever degree we have done that, to that degree we'll be able to maintain our good qualities, our civilized nature, our humanity. We'll be able to maintain that. Krishna preserves what we have and he carries what we lack. Yeah.
And just what's coming up in my mind is like how can you have like the whole, it's like what you were saying about the material nature, anything bad that happens can throw us into like this really like horrible suffering if it takes away from our sense gratification. And then the whole society is kind of like that.
Yeah.
So it's just like from the top, everything's going good now, but if something starts to go wrong, there's like no structure or no ability to handle it.
Exactly, and that's exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that this society is guaranteed to be ruined at some point, guaranteed because of the atheistic nature and faith in matter, material nature.
Yeah, this is nice. I was hearing recently, around the time of Lord Ram's appearance day, I was hearing about some pastimes of the Ramayana, and it was a Ravana, when I forget, was it his sister, Suparnaka, when she got her nose and everything cut off and mutilated and came back to him and was complaining, like, you must do something about this. He was completely angry, and he was he was like completely offended and disturbed, and the comment was made that it wasn't because he actually cared about his sister. It was just because, oh, she's in my family and someone has done this to my family member. How can I accept this dishonor?
Yeah.
So in the same way, I mean, we might see like the leaders like trying to maintain and seemingly care for their citizens, but it's really just because they've extended their sense gratification beyond
Their
just
possessiveness.
their own selves. It's like, these are mine. I mean, me
Right.
and mine. I'm the owner and controller of this society, so I have to
Right.
fight for control.
It's a very good point. It goes deep in the human psyche, right? This is my people because this is how I get my sense gratification. It's how I get my resources. So whatever is for me, myself, and I, it's mine, and it better be mine because I'm going to use it for myself. So as long as people think like that, you have that issue. American society is interesting because it is not based off of that. There's actually an initial mentality in the structure of the government that the government is owned by everyone, right? That the government is not a person. When you go to before that time, India, Europe, everything, the kings were always from a family, and the families always thought they had a divine right to rule. And so here in the United States, we have more freedom in that sense because there's no one on the governmental level is allowed to, push their will onto people because they have some divine right to rule. This is at least how the laws are created. So as a result, you have like the Mormons running their own state, practically speaking. You have a religion that's become so influential that they're controlling the entire state of Utah, practically, and make their own rules. If there were enough devotees, we could outlaw, drinking. We could outlaw eating of meat. You can do that. There's counties, they're called dry counties, and it's illegal to drink. You can do these things in this country because it is not about one family that is seeing everything as belonging to them. It's really about what do the people kind of want to do. So at any rate, the chance for a Krishna conscious society is never more possible, especially if it's a grassroots movement where you have many, many people coming together on the principles of Krishna consciousness. You're allowed to in this country. There would be no family or there would be no obstruction to that sort of business. One church is actually going to build a $1 billion building in downtown, Houston, for housing and different things. It's quite a big deal. So at any rate, it's kind of open in many ways here, this Kshatriya position. It's not consolidated by any means or controlled by historical familial reasons. And we agree with this, basically, because Krishna says that Varnashram, or your your so-called caste is not based off of your birth. Yeah? Krishna doesn't say, what is it? Chaturvarna mayashrishtam janma karma vibhagashaha. He says guna karma vibhagashaha, not janma karma vibhagashaha. It's not birth, it's not your family, it's your quality. And Prabhupada came to the West. He proved this by giving Krishna consciousness to Westerners. And we were discussing this yesterday, how much he was criticized heavily by his godbrothers, by the people in India for giving Brahminical initiation to Westerners. But our principle is that everyone can be elevated to the platform of a Vaishnava, because everyone is a spirit soul, and everyone deserves this right because they are spirit souls. Everyone is deserving of it. And it's our business to educate people like that. Actually, our society is a society meant for education, not necessarily worship. Worship is there as a part of education. Without education, there's no worship. Not that we should just be a society of worship, but actually, Prabhupada's intention, and we read this in the Lilamrita several times, Prabhupada's intention for a temple was that it was a center of education. Because after all, Krishna, the goal of religion is to know and love God. This is the goal, to know and love God. So we also have a responsibility, and Prabhupada points this out here, that this Krishna consciousness movement is essential for saving society, because they have no knowledge about God and they don't love God. They are ignorant and they're attached to material enjoyment. And so what will be the result? If we don't help them, we're also going to have to experience that same result. We're going to have to experience that because this material nature will react to the atheism, right? So we also are taking donations. We're also taking money. And if we don't educate the people that are giving donations to us in Krishna consciousness, it becomes a bit like that too. Of course, naturally we're not. We're worshiping the deities. We're spending lavishly here for the deity worship. We're spending lavishly for programs and for educating Krishna house, for educating people. This is the proper use of Krishna's money, to educate them in Krishna consciousness, so that one day they become sufficiently responsible that they're ready to also give back, and give back to the society, give back to another person who might be ready for devotional service, and be part of all of this responsible human life. So this is really how money should be spent for Krishna's service. And the rest of the world should take a note of that and follow our lead in this way. And all the people that are donating him, they're providing an example. More we're capable at providing shelter, the better we're doing our service. The more people we can give shelter in means the more people we're educating in Krishna consciousness. So we have to expand this to all sections of society. It's not easy, but is kind of the standing order to spread Krishna consciousness. It is the most scientific and authorized movement for the actual welfare of the whole human society. The Krishna consciousness movement is the only hope to save the world from such devastation. People might say, oh, well, because every religion goes around and says, well, we know what's right. We know what's best. And that's okay, let's discuss. The details matter at this point. But as far as we're concerned here, we're convinced that Krishna consciousness is the only hope to save society, because it's the only thing that takes the activities of humanity and takes it from the mode of passion and ignorance and elevates it to the mode of goodness and ultimately to transcendence. This understanding exists nowhere in society. So just that fact alone, you can say, we're the only ones that can ultimately help. So someone identifies with the principles of Krishna consciousness. If they're a Kshatriya, they see that I'm not the ruler, I'm not the owner, I'm the servant of everyone. But again, here in America, there's a very good opportunity for that, because this is also the understanding the original understanding, at least, of the founding fathers of this country, that someone is a public servant. So there's actually a very good consciousness in the United States for the business of Krishna consciousness, and obviously Prabhupada proved that many years ago. That someone who is taking a responsibility in society is actually a servant of all of society. And this is our dharma, you could say. Any other questions, comments, realizations? Some devotees in the back there.
You were mentioning that America is better off than some governments which are run by certain families. But ultimately, Prabhupada called America, he called democracy demon crazy. They elect, they don't know who could be an actual leader, so they elect one big dog. He barks for 4 years.
Right.
They get tired of him and get another dog. Prabhupada said actually the best thing is the monarchy. I don't mean to play the devil's advocate here, but
Sure.
he said monarchy is the best system, but you have to have a proper king, a Krishna conscious king. So that's ultimately what we want to establish.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the challenge in Kali Yuga is that everyone is Shudra. In Kali Yuga, everyone's a Shudra, and so everyone gets corrupted by power. Shudras are corrupted instantly by power. And so it's a difficulty. If we can actually train people up and bring them to the platform of pure devotees, then yeah, it's not an issue if someone has power and influence, because, you know, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, but someone who's pure is absolutely not corruptible. In another statement, Prabhupada said that they will let us run everything eventually because they'll trust us, because they'll see that we're pure, we're not self-interested in our behavior. We don't want the power for our own sense gratification, and actually will deliberately use everything for everyone's benefit like a proper king. So in this way also, not just educating people, but practically, if we're in control of things, actually doing it for the benefit of others, that's the primary qualification. So, I mean, yes, this is true, because then, you know, one pure person can naturally distribute all the resources easily. The reason the government was made the way it is because the kings were, you know, being selfish with everything, and that one person was ruining it for everybody. So they thought, let's create a government so the government does very little, and good individual people can continue to live their lives, and the government won't come in and stop that from happening. And as a result, there's tremendous prosperity. Also happened in Rome. But yeah, ultimately, because there's no real guide, there's no real father for the whole of society, what happens is it does eventually degrade severely. So what I'm speaking to is that there's a great opportunity, because people in this country recognize the need to do things properly, and that someone is a servant if they're in a leadership position. And so we can relate to that consciousness very much. And if people are convinced of us, then yeah, naturally we can be voted in ourselves. Like I said, there's no government that's going to stop you. Like if you're in England, they had one religion. The king made his own religion because he wanted to divorce his wife. And ultimately he couldn't, so he killed her. So he could then get a different wife, because he couldn't have two wives. So, all of that selfishness is baked into the cake in Kali Yuga, so it's difficult. So my point is that there's an opportunity, particularly in this country, because of the structural arrangement of the whole thing, that the government can never come in and say, oh, you Hare Krishnas, you own too much land, and we need to stop you. They won't do that. They can never do that, according to their rules anyway. So within that, yeah, you can establish your own monarchy, actually, to some degree. You can actually do that. For example, in Idaho, you can start a nonprofit organization, and you can make one person as the board of directors. One person. So they become the de facto monarch. So, you can do that. Prabhu, did you have... No, I'm done.
If we see the acharyas, most of the acharyas, they never commented on the problems of the present society. They never condemned even Aurangzeb or anything. As far as Prabhupada is concerned, he always pointed out what is the present scenario in the society.
Yeah.
It is not only Krishna conscious can save them. It is, we have to see that the present problems situated, whatever arising from scarcity or war, everything. There are so many complexes are there. But at the present state, we are not looking into that points, as Prabhupada always mentions, that these are the faults in the society, they should do that. We are only concentrating only Krishna consciousness, but there are many problems other than that. When we solve their personal problems and society problems and communal problem, they will be favoring us for Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
That also we should look out.
It's a good point. If we, and particularly if we can look at our community, our society, if we can solve all of our problems within our own circle of influence, people will see that. They'll recognize that, and they will start asking, how are you doing what you're doing? You're doing something wonderful. How is it going? How are you doing that? We want to get the same result. This is a very powerful way of preaching. Was it Dr. Heal Thyself sort of thing? Oh yeah, Rishabdev. Yeah. Don't be shy. Stick that in.
I heard, and I just looked it up right now, that in Radhadesh they have like a democracy type of system going on there.
And most of Iskcon have board of directors and things like that.
Yeah.
So, but are they voting there?
That's what I've heard that they do.
That's
They vote
interesting.
on it. Yeah. So, what do you think in Iskcon, if that would be like something that would be, if we were doing something like that? Because it's like he was saying, we're normally voting in a pretty crazy person, but
Voting in a crazy, yeah, that's probably.
but like
You don't want that to happen.
in society.
Well,
but
here's
like
an
in-
interesting
in like
interesting
a
thought for you.
Krishna society.
Yeah. We're Vaishnavas, right?
Right.
Vaishnavas are what? Above Varnashram.
Yeah.
Right. Vaishnava, Daivi Varnashram. If we're Vaishnavas, pure devotees, we're above Varnashram. Right? Vaishnava doesn't have to act according to Varna, but he does for the benefit of society. So does a Vaishnava have to do what the king tells him to do? No, because he's always doing the best thing all the time. In fact, the king should be worshiping the Vaishnava. He should be supporting whatever the Vaishnava wants to do. When the four Kumaras, they're considered liberated souls, Brahmanas, and indeed they're Vaishnavas. They became pure devotees by Krishna's smelling the Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai, smelling the tulsi leaves. So when they came, Prithu Maharaj said, "You're actually the owners of everything. I should be, I'm worshiping you. This is sit on the throne. It's actually your throne." So this is a very interesting. How do Vaishnavas organize themselves? If I'm a Vaishnava, if we're assuming we're all devotees, and we often do this, where I'm a devotee, you're a devotee, we're all the devotees here. Krishna has given us our freedom. We're free to act, free from even material nature, if we're indeed, pure devotees. And certainly Krishna has given all of us a tremendous amount of freedom to choose what we do. So it behooves us to listen to each other and actually take a form of listening to each other to manage ourselves. Not that one is oppressing their will over the others. I mean, I could say my way of thinking about it, but this is the idea with American democracy anyway. I don't care to talk about politics, actually. I don't care at all. But it's the principle of if someone is free and another person is equally free, it's an offense if someone tries to oppose their will onto another person. But if someone is given the authority to be, say, temple president by the agreement of the Vaishnavas, then it behooves us to follow their authority. And this is the principle of democracy, that the people have agreed that, we're willing to accept authority from this person. Now, the problem is obviously people are ignorant and they don't know who to pick. That's the problem. But amongst Vaishnavas, are we fools or are we Vaishnavas? We're not. We're Vaishnavas. So this is, I'm not making an argument for changing anything. Krishna is in control ultimately of everything, and we all have to live with that. You know what I mean? We have to live with the fact that Krishna is actually in control, and we all have something to learn by whatever circumstance we're in. And ultimately, it's to our benefit to learn humility, tolerance, kindness, and learn fealty towards Krishna's arrangement, whatever that is, whatever we've walked into. But at the same time, these things can't be denied. Devotees are, free to choose Krishna or matter, and in the association of other devotees, we do better. So if we all associate with each other, hear from each other, and cooperate, as Prabhupada wanted us to do, we cooperate, we will do better. We'll do better. Vaishnava association is the most important thing. That doesn't mean that, when it comes to running society, that stops. I'll stop now. One more thing. A king, Prabhupada describes in the 6th canto, that a king listens to his ministers. He listens to his ministers. He doesn't just exert his will endlessly over his ministers. But an intelligent king has a relationship where he hears from his ministers and gets information, and then from there makes an intelligent decision. So all of these things can exist. If someone is pure, you can have an autocracy, because a pure person will be a humble person, and they'll listen. Indra Swami told me in a conversation, he said, to lead means to listen. Right? Because when you listen, you can know what people need, and then you can provide them with what they need. And if that is your goal in life, simply listening is a huge asset. You can listen. You don't need to vote. You don't need to do... The structure is irrelevant, actually. The key is, are people pure? And are we developing purity? And whoever is more pure out of everyone else, they naturally should be the leader. And Prabhupada exemplified this, obviously, himself, by listening to his disciples in different circumstances and saying, what do you think we should do? And they would cooperate, collaborate, and then move forward together in a cooperative way. Though, ultimately, there's so many complications. The key is, how can we all cooperate? Because when we cooperate, we're that much stronger. So at any rate, hope that helps a little bit. No answers, more questions. That's all I got to say. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.